Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the EPA Podcast right here on BGN Radio, of course, Bleeding Green Nation. I am one of your hosts today, Victor Williams. Be sure to follow me on all platforms over at the Philly Pod. Your Philadelphia Eagles are 7-0 after a dominant victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers. So dominant that the starters didn't even have to play, didn't have to play the whole fourth quarter, rather. And I'll explain why I was upset about that later on in the show. Joining me, as always, my other co-host. You can follow him on Twitter at Half and Half TPL. He does phenomenal Eagles coverage over there. Make sure you go check out his YouTube channel for all 22 coverage, so you can better understand why the Eagles are so good this year. My guy Shane Haff, what's going on, man? Undefeated still. When does it end? We are just riding high until you can't ride anymore. How's it feel, man?
It feels great. Still undefeated. I'm going to go ahead and spoil for everyone that I'm pretty sure it was gambling related is why you were unhappy with the end of the game. Is that where we're going today?
Yeah, man. Not a fun time. So I had a ticket, which was Jalen Hurts 300 passing yards, AJ Brown 100 receiving yards, and AJ Brown anytime touchdown. And they pulled Jalen Hurts with 285 with 10 minutes to go. I'm sitting here counting my money. I'm thinking, all right, I'm $100 richer. No, there was a couple drops. AJ and Devontae each dropped one. And maybe if AJ Brown gets in the end zone on that fourth score, maybe I'm sitting here $100 richer. But alas, it doesn't roll my way as it tends to go with these things. Do not follow my footsteps if you are a degenerate like myself. It was a great ticket. It was great. It just didn't work out. But yeah, the important thing is here, no substantial injuries. Obviously, Jordan Davis. We'll get into that later on. But you pull everybody on a short week, and when you have a Thursday night game coming up, it's always good to get extended rest. But Shane, man, just initial takeaways on being 7-0, handling the Pittsburgh Steelers out of the bye week the way we did, and potentially it looks like that the Eagles have their guy. It looks like they have their guy at quarterback, and if it wasn't evident. If it wasn't evident like a few weeks ago that the Eagles are going to extend him, it's surely evident now after this week.
Yeah, I've watched the Eagles this year, and in my mind, I've sort of put them on tier 2 behind like the Bills and the Chiefs. Bills and Chiefs, like they're going to duke it out, and anything can happen in one game in a Super Bowl. We've obviously seen that as Eagles fans. Nick Foles going up against Tom Brady winning a Super Bowl, so anything can happen in one game, but you look at it and you're like, and the Bills, the Chiefs, they're on another level. The Eagles, they could win that matchup, a 1-in-10 shot, whatever. But as I watched the game on Sunday, I started to feel like for the first time that the Eagles are truly on that same level as the Bills and the Chiefs, that it's truly a coin flip when they match up against each other, assuming they take care of business and they get there to begin with. But, and I know it's the Steelers, and maybe that's a silly reaction, but the Eagles were just so dominant in every facet of the game yesterday. And we expected that from the defense against Kenny Pickett in the offense, but the Steelers are known for having a good defense, and their defense isn't as good this year, but the Eagles just dominated the game from whistle to whistle, and it was impressive to see. And I really liked some of the nuances that I saw, some of the new things that I saw coming out of the bye week on both sides of the ball that made me feel so confident in this coaching staff's ability to adjust over time as well.
Yeah, if there was one thing we didn't have to worry about, it was the Eagles being prepared coming out of the bye week. We know Jalen Hurts mentality. Nick Sirianni is going to have his guys ready. As we talked about on last week's podcast, the worry level on coming out of the bye week, rusty or unprepared, certainly wasn't high with this Eagles team. And it's not like the Steelers have bad players. Yes, they're rebuilding, but they have some talent there, especially their wide receivers. We highlighted it last week. Pickens, Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson all held to just 80 yards. Pickens held without a catch for the first time in his young career. Bradbury had a lot to do with that. I feel like he was targeted like 20 times throughout the game. Darius Slay obviously doing what he does, but the man of the hour and the highlight of the week was obviously AJ Brown, showing exactly why the Eagles invested that $100 million contract into him immediately following the trade. For whatever reason, the Titans didn't think it was worth it. We'll take the picks. We'll go ahead and get Treylon Burks. And now A.J. Brown is sitting here with more receiving yards than every Titans wide receiver combined. A.J. Brown came down with touchdowns of 39 yards, 27 yards, and 29 yards, all in the first half, becoming the first player since 2004, Shane, the first player in 18 years to record 3 touchdowns of 25-plus yards in the first half. The last guy to do it was not Terrell Owens. People keep thinking it's him, but it was Drew Bennett, who was also a Titans player. So history is certainly repeating yourself. Your reactions to AJ Brown, not only just being good, but the fact that the Eagles have a guy who can completely take over and transform a game. And it literally is pick your poison with this offense. It's not like they needed a ton of contributions from everybody else, but for AJ Brown to post career high 156 yards and his first 3 touchdown game, and this is barely scratching the surface of what this team can be.
I just don't know how you stop the offense. And we've talked about that a little bit before, but do you want to blitz because the Eagles struggle against the blitz? Well, if you keep 2 high safeties like the Cardinals did, they're just going to play horizontal. They're going to throw screens. They're going to get the ball to playmakers on the perimeter. You want to blitz without a single high coverage like the Steelers did. They're going to take those shots to A.J. Brown downfield all day. Mina Kimes had a clip going around on Twitter earlier today talking about how the Eagles just change their identity every game. They just decide how they're going to beat you today. And
exactly.
It's so crazy just how well they shift their identity. They were more 12 and 13 personnel in this game. They did a lot of like play action, max protect, shot plays, and that's not what we've seen them do this year. Before the bye, they were a 4 wide, spread it out screen team, and now they're max protecting, taking deep shots. They kept a running back or a tight end into block on 19 snaps in this game. In the first 6 weeks combined, they only had 40. So almost half of the time that they did in the first 6 weeks combined, they were keeping extra blockers in to attack vertically. I don't know how you stop a team that can just shift. How do you game plan for that? How do you know what you're going to face? Are the Eagles going to be run heavy this week? Are they going to be RPO heavy? Are they going to take shots? Are they going to run screens? They can shift so flawlessly from one identity to another. And we've talked about the Eagles offense being simple. And one of the things that is nice about that simplicity is it's just so easy for them to shift to something else entirely.
I think that was most evident on the fourth. I think it was the 4th down on the first possession it was, and they ran that RPO where at one point, like you could do a still frame of the play where Jalen Hurts is mid handoff, and either Miles is going to run it, Jalen Hurts is going to keep it himself, and Dallas Goedert is already running out in the flat towards the sideline. At that point in time, there's 3 different ways that they can execute that play. And yes, RPOs are subjective and it depends on how you run it. But Jalen Hurts runs it to such an elite level that it's truly almost nearly impossible to defend. That there's 3 different possible outcomes, and you have to be. And if you commit to one or even 2 of them, the third option is going to be productive. That is the scariest thing about this offense. And you see AJ Brown, who caught I think all 3 touchdowns, according to Next Gen Stats, who are obviously the ones that keep track of all this route classifications and everything. They say that AJ Brown was the first player in an NFL game in history of football that caught 3 touchdowns, all on go routes and double coverage. I'm pretty sure he's the first guy to do that. And it's almost like you think you're watching a replay, but it's just they're doing the same thing and it can't be stopped. Minkah Fitzpatrick, as good as he is, I'm a Minkah fan. I was hoping the Eagles would make a move for him before he went to the Steelers. But man, that guy's he's going to have PTSD for a while. This is reminiscent of what was it, Des Bryant to Bradley Fletcher on Thanksgiving, I think it was, or whoever he abused on Thanksgiving. It was reminiscent of that because every time A.J. Brown scored, Minkah Fitzpatrick was in the frame, and it's terrorizing when there's just nothing you can do. By the time that third score happens, you just gotta say, I can't do it. I just don't know what to do.
Well, and you mentioned that RPO on the 4th down. The Steelers defended that play almost perfectly.
I remember watching it, and I was like, they've defended it as good as they could.
They have the defensive end commits to Miles Sanders. The safety is screaming downhill from his single high spot to go take Hurts. And Dallas Goedert just beats his guy to the flat. And the guy's covering him the whole way, but Goedert beats it. Like, it's so simple. And the Steelers executed almost perfectly. And it just doesn't matter. And then, you talk about the A.J. Brown touchdowns. That first touchdown, the Eagles ran a dagger concept. So you got the inside receiver, which is Brown, runs a vertical route. He's a clear out route. He's not even in the progression. You're trying to free up Devonta Smith on the deep end route. And the deep end route is wide open. Like, Hurts should not have thrown that ball. It's not the right read. He shouldn't have thrown it, but he throws it into double coverage and, hey, my guy's just better than your guy. And it doesn't even matter. And so even on a play like that, if that was the 3rd touchdown, I would have thought it was like a heat check, like Brown's on. This was the first one. Just my guy's better than your guy. And I made a mistake in the progression, and it just doesn't matter. So the margins are just so wide for this offense with the way that they're playing right now.
Yeah, and watching the film, Devontae broke. I believe it was across the middle of the field, right? The dig you mentioned, and he was definitely open. And it hurts says forget all that and just bombs it to AJ Brown. But I think the big distinction with Hurts this year from last year is that he has confidence in his receivers, which I can't fault him last year because if Jalen Rager's playing 60% of the snaps, you're not going to be very confident in throwing to your receivers. But you even saw it with the one target that Quez Watkins had. He threw it up to him and he didn't come down with it. But that's having the level of confidence in your guys that I'm at least going to give him a 50-50 chance of coming down with this ball. It seems like that ratio, that chance is a lot higher when you throw to AJ Brown because it doesn't matter. Like he said on one of his touchdowns, he said 1, 2, and 2 is not enough. You're going to need another guy to even have a remote chance of stopping me from catching this football. So that is impressive all around. Jalen Hurts on the day was 68% completion, 19 of 28, 285 yards, 4 touchdowns. 0 picks, 140.6 rating. He makes AJ Brown look like a star, and AJ Brown does the very same for Jalen Hurts. I think the most telling stat this year is Jalen Hurts' 16 total touchdowns. And I know people scoff at the total touchdowns thing, but he threw for 4 of them. He only had, 2? I want to say 2 rushing attempts on
Yeah, he
Sunday.
didn't run the ball very much.
They only ran it 12 times when Hurts was on the field, I believe. I think Miles had 9 carries. Hurts carried it twice, and Boston Scott, I think, got one. So the whole total touchdowns, when people being mad at it's starting to go away. 16 total touchdowns on the year for Jalen Hurts to just 2 turnovers, and both of them were off batted balls. The one, the Jags, I think that was a pretty bad throw from what I remember. That was in like triple coverage, and he tried to just squeeze it into a window. But man, his ball security continues to be the most impressive thing. On top of everything else Jalen Hurts is doing this year, his ball security remains the most impressive in my opinion.
Yeah, he just doesn't put the football in harm's way. You had the one against Jacksonville. There was another one, I think it was against the Cardinals, I can't remember, that should have been intercepted. That was a similar read. Other than that, I don't really recall times that he's put the ball in danger. His other interception was off of Kenny Gainwell's hands on that screen pass. I think it was against the Vikings. The Eagles' turnover differential is just absurd. They're plus 14, which leads the league. Second place is only plus 6. So they're more than double the turnover differential of the next closest team. And the offense is just schemed so well. I mean, you take the top off of the defense a couple times with AJ Brown, and they come out the next or a couple drives later, and it's underneath. And then they throw a bubble screen look, and the corner bites down, and AJ Brown right over the top again. And they come back 2 drives later with Zach Pascal in the slot and Dallas Goedert out wide. And almost every time they've used that alignment, it's been a screen to Goedert, except this time it wasn't. It's a fake screen with a wheel route to Zach Pascal. He's wide open. Like
everyone bid on it.
Everyone made that throw, and it's just an easy touchdown. And so the Eagles offense is just running circles around people, and they're doing it schematically. They're doing it with execution. Like this isn't Jalen Hurts just hitting wide open guys all the time. This is Jalen Hurts playing at an elite level. The receivers are playing at an elite level. And oh, by the way, the coaching staff is scheming things up at an elite level too. And so the offense, I couldn't be more impressed with how they looked coming out of the bye.
I think Nick Sirianni and Shane Steichen, whoever was responsible for that, rewarded Zach Pascal because, like I've seen you mention, he's exclusively blocking out of the slot, more often than not. So I think they rewarded him for that, for all the dirty work that he does in getting Zach Pascal that touchdown, because we've seen Goddard, we've seen that rep 20, 25 times this season. So of course, naturally the defense is, and I think that they blitz on that play too. So they were probably trying to push Hurts and the Eagles out of field goal range. They're like, we're going to stop this and also pressure Hurts, and Zach Pascal's running free because nobody's concerned with Zach Pascal because on film he is blocking. So nobody thinks that he's about to be downfield. So very, very good stuff from the Eagles offense. One concern, and I probably shouldn't consider this a concern because we know how the offense is, but Quez Watkins had the one target. He's had just 8 targets since week 2. Since obviously his touchdown against the Minnesota Vikings. Any level of concern there, or is this just a product of you can't get the ball to everybody?
Yeah, I certainly expected Quez Watkins to have more than 88 receiving yards at this point in the season. I really thought he would be the deep threat. I thought he would be the one that took the top off of defenses, and that hasn't manifested itself. I'm not concerned about it because AJ Brown has done that. So it's not like the Eagles don't have a deep threat. It just hasn't come in the way that I expected. Um, I don't know how, as a defense, you align yourself to take away AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert without opening yourself up to the run. I guess it becomes a concern if a team can figure that out and there's nowhere for Hurts to go. But I still believe in the explosiveness of Watkins. The offense is just working at such a high level right now. I think it's just a byproduct of that mostly.
Yeah, I think I agree. We should probably see more of Quez down the road as defenses. We are playing, not for nothing. We're playing bad teams, so maybe when we see who's the best secondary coming up, there's not many good ones. not many good ones. I guess Jair Alexander in Green Bay is probably the next like tough guy we're going to see. So it'll be interesting to see how the Eagles offense deals with that. As far as the pass rush, Kenny Pickett, like I mentioned, obviously didn't want to challenge Darius Slay threw a whole lot at James Bradbury, but the pass rush continues to apply pressure, getting to Kenny Pickett 6 times. They had 6 total sacks, 11 QB hits, I believe 18 total pressure. Sasan Reddick had a very nice stunt and leads the team in sacks currently, but they did suffer a blow with Jordan Davis and his high ankle sprain. Left the game in the second quarter. Early diagnosis says he's going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. Shane, how big of a blow is Jordan Davis to this defensive line, and how do you think they attempt to fill that void moving forward now that we're past the trade deadline and they can't bring in anybody else?
Yeah, that's a devastating injury, especially in terms of your run defense. One of the things I wanted to see from the Eagles coming out of the bye was them allowing Jordan Davis to play in some of those 4-man fronts, and they actually did that. And then he got hurt like 4 snaps later. So I'm sad that we have to put off seeing that now. But they've almost exclusively used him as the zero technique, the guy that's head up on a center in their 5-man fronts, which has been their primary run defense. After he got hurt, they put Marlon Tuipulotu in there for like 2 snaps in that role, and both times he got pushed like 8 yards off the line of scrimmage, and they never played that 5-man front again. So you would like him to be able to do it. You don't want to put Fletcher Cox there. Like the only other option, I guess, is maybe you could try to put Javon Hargrave there, but you hate to do that with the way he's rushing the passer. And so I think they may try to make it work with Marlon Tuipulotu. Otherwise, you probably won't see a lot of 5-man fronts again until Davis gets back. The biggest issue is going to be that this is going to make life more difficult on TJ Edwards. Those 5-man fronts are designed to keep Edwards clean so he can read it out and plug the hole. And if you're not able to play in those fronts, now all of a sudden Edwards is going to be deconstructing blocks. He's got to react faster, which is one of the strengths of his game. It's his run defense, but it certainly will hurt the run defense. We'll see how the Eagles respond. If they'll start to put more guys in the box, what the solution will be.
What do you think is the deal with Milton Williams? He's a guy that we were very excited about when he drafted. He tested like Aaron Donald, all these things, and he had a good rookie season, I believe. And this year, not so much. Obviously, with the depth and bringing in Jordan Davis, that kind of stunts that. But you haven't heard his name a whole lot this year, but still somebody very talented along that defensive line. Does this open up any additional opportunities for him? How do you see Milton Williams' role carved out in the future?
I don't know that it opens up much more of a role for Milton Williams because he's not the kind of guy that you're going to play in that Jordan Davis role. He's a little light. He's under 300 pounds. He's not a nose tech sort of guy. So why he hasn't played more in the rotation, I'm not sure. I don't think it necessarily opens up more roles for him unless it's just that they're using Marlon Tuipulotu or they're using Javon Hargrave more in that role. And so it gets him on the field more in relief of them in pass rushing situations. But Williams is not the best run defender. He's a little more of a pass rusher. And I kind of think he just got caught in a numbers game where the Eagles signed a bunch of they've got a bunch of good pass rushers. And what they needed was someone who can step in and stop the run. And so I think he's been more of a numbers game than anything. Maybe we will see him a little bit more now, though, that some of these other guys will have to be a little more run defense specific.
Right. The highlight of this defense, obviously, CJ Gardner-Johnson. Even I'm not going to say game-sealing interception because the game was over, but he essentially ended the game with that interception off of the batted pass from TJ Edwards. Very good game for him, for Gardner-Johnson. 1 sack, 8 tackles, 1 pass defended, and that interception. Is this CJ Gardner-Johnson improving as a safety every week? I believe we've mentioned this before, that Howie probably said if you play like a safety, we'll pay you like one after the year. Is he truly improving as a safety in this defense, or is he just a beneficiary of good linebacker play?
He is living right. He's doing something right. Like, he catches another interception that is tipped right to
He's
him.
a magnet, man. 4 in the last 3 weeks, I think. 4 interceptions.
Yeah, and I think 3 of the 4 have been tipped. Like, it's just, he is always in the right place at the right time.
Hey, that's plain safety, though. That's plain safety.
That's plain safety. And so I think there's a little bit of both. I think he's getting a little more comfortable. He's certainly caught some big breaks in high leverage situations. The tipped interception, his sack came off of him blitzing out of the slot. He came in untouched and got Kenny Pickett, so they schemed him that. He did make a great play on that, because Pickett sees it immediately and tries to get around him, and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson breaks down and makes the tackle, and that's not easy to do when you're flying at a mobile quarterback off the edge, and we know he's had some tackling difficulties, so that was a great play by him. I think he's playing better, though, and another thing I really liked that I saw from the defense was some of the creativity in the pass rushing plans. There was a chart floating around on Twitter before the game showing the Eagles had the lowest stunt rate in the NFL. So they're not doing any sort of pass rush games. And one look that we saw several times in this game, they would put Hassan Reddick as a 4 tech. So he's lined up like on the inside shoulder of the tackle. And then they would have Josh Sweat outside of him. So you've got 2 edge rushers on the same side, and they would put 3 defensive tackles to the other side. And it should be obvious something's up there, because the Eagles obviously aren't going to put 3 defensive tackles on one side and 2 edge rushers on the other side. And they kept running these stunts with Hassan Reddick, where the defensive tackles would push against the line slide, and then they would just loop Reddick around. And he got a couple sacks. He had another couple that were free runs, and the ball just came out quick. So, I mean, there's pros and cons to that. It opens you up to some rushing, some draws and things like that. But creating chaos for opposing offensive lines is always fun to watch. And you saw him do it several times. Josh Sweat got one. Even Brandon Graham got one. And so I really liked what I saw. But Javon Hargrave, man, he had himself a game against his former team. 2 sacks, 6 pressures. One of his sacks came with him. He was trying to draw the double team and allow Josh Sweat to stunt inside. And he shed the double team, and he got to pick it before Sweat could. So Javon Hargrave had a heck of a game.
Yeah, a good overall game from the defense. Obviously, we knew it was a rookie quarterback in Kenny Pickett and a reeling Steelers team, but good teams take care of bad teams. And I could see like the whole like bad schedule thing. I could see if the Eagles were like edging out wins over these bad teams, but they're just stomping them in the dirt. That's what you do when you're the superior team, and it's been very fun to watch. And we'll see how it all shakes out coming up against Houston. Shane, any final notes on the Steelers game before we move ahead and touch on the trade deadline a bit?
2 things. One, you mentioned the strength of schedule. And actually, if you go look by opponent winning percentage, the Eagles have played the 12th hardest schedule so far in the NFL. So, I mean, you look
at not many good teams this year. It's not our fault.
The Vikings, the Cowboys both have good records. And so now their schedule is certainly easy the rest of the way out. And I wish they were tested by some more teams down the stretch, but they're a good football team. So I'm not concerned about that. You know, would I like them to gut out a few 4th quarter games against some playoff caliber opponents just to get into that flow? I mean, it'd be nice, but I don't want to gut out 4th quarters against the Steelers, and the Eagles are taking care of business, and that's all you can really ask for from them. The other thing is special teams.
Special teams returning punts again, man.
it's still an issue. I mean, you have a penalty on a field goal attempt that ends up turning it into a touchdown. You give up a fake
bogus
punt.
penalty though. Bogus.
Yeah.
What was the reasoning? A move, not like football. Whatever.
Non-football move. Whatever that. I think they were saying that Brandon Graham like said hut to try to.
It was hilarious though when they showed the replay. He definitely baited them.
Yeah. So I don't know on that, but regardless, you can't do that. The Eagles special teams gave the Steelers 7 of their 13 points, and then the fake punt. It's the second fake punt that's got them. So they've
been biting on that for like 4 years now.
Yeah. And then even at the end of the game, and it's in garbage time, it doesn't matter. But Aaron Sipos had like a 37-yard punt at the end of the game, and she's like, "What are we doing here?" So special teams continues to be something to monitor. It has not cost the Eagles yet, but it feels like a ticking time bomb at this point.
Yeah, I was shocked Michael Clay even came back this year after the way special teams looked last year. I was shocked they brought him back, and now they have no returners. They're using Devontae again. Don't want one of your top receivers back there fielding punts all the time. The feel good story of Britton Covey certainly hasn't worked out. Is Devin Allen still hanging around the practice squad? Might be time for him to get a look. I don't know what his status is, but obviously not a full time football player, so we don't know how that's going to check out. We thought the Eagles would potentially make a move for a return man or something of the sort at the trade deadline. But of course, they Robert Quinn remained the only move that the Eagles did. We thought Howie had something up his sleeve at the buzzer. There was rumblings of running backs, Kareem Hunt or Naheem Hines. I saw Jamal Williams rumors running around. And then you have the Naheem Hines brought you return ability, and you had the Sirianni connection. So I was all about ready to accept that. I was like, he's an Eagle at this point. And then he goes to Buffalo for what was it, a sixth, and Zach Moss, I think it was. And if Howie didn't want to match that, then he just wasn't interested in bringing anybody additional. Anyway, Shane, how disappointed are we that the Eagles did not bring any additional help for special teams? Any running backs to help take the load off Miles down the stretch. I believe Miles is on pace to have his heaviest workload of his career thus far, or a backup safety. Man, you got to pray one of these guys don't go down because I'm not trying to see Kayvon Wallace in a playoff game.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I mean, it's always fun to make moves, but you look at the Eagles draft picks, they don't have a fourth, fifth, or sixth in the upcoming draft. So that makes it a little hard to make moves. And certainly they could figure out ways around that. But there was nobody that got moved at a price tag that made me think, oh, the Eagles missed out. There's things you would like to have, a backup tight end, a backup safety. At the end of the day, they are backups. It becomes an issue if somebody gets hurt, but every team has guys that if they went down, it'd be really hard to replace them. So ultimately, Robert Quinn is the move. It's a good move in my opinion.
If he was made at the deadline, we'd be a lot happier. I guess it was a couple days too early, so we're not feeling great.
I'm glad that the Eagles did not overpay for something, which could have been a concern. You don't have a fourth, fifth, or sixth. Maybe you've got to give a third for one of those guys that's worth a fourth. And so I was glad that Howie showed restraint and didn't overpay. I wasn't too in on the running back thing. It would have been fine. I just don't think running back is really a big need. So I was more just looking at backups at other positions, and I'm fine with it. Just don't ask me if Dallas Goedert or Chauncey Gardner.
I was about to say, no Alberto, man. Our wishes are over. The wish list ends at we were the only two capping for the guy, screaming up and down the timeline, and people were like, "Oh, Calcaterra, he's fine. Stahl is guy. They just haven't gotten opportunities." I'm like, if you want to see Jack Stahl catch passes, then be my guest. I don't want to be one of those guys, but it is what it is. We do have Trey Sermon, though, in the back. When I was looking into Jeff Wilson, and I was like, man, another 49ers running back. We don't even use the first one we got. So maybe if Miles is lost for, knock on wood, a certain amount of time, Gainwell, Boston Scott, and Trey Sermon can carry the load by committee. I was just concerned with the pass protection because we cannot pass block to save our lives. I'm seeing Gainwell get beat left and right. I haven't dove too deeply in the all-22 yet. I'm doing that later, but I don't know how the pass protection worked out, but I wanted somebody to come in here and like attempt to protect Jalen Hurts on some of these edge rushers. It doesn't look like we are going to get that though.
Surprisingly, they did well this week.
Oh yeah.
I think Sanders pass blocked on 6 snaps and Gainwell did on 1. They picked up their guy every time, never allowed a pressure. So
hey. Did they pick him up or did they get steamrolled? Did they get steamrolled?
No. They picked him up and gave time to get the ball out. So it was a good day for pass protection. And maybe that's one of the things they focused on cleaning up out of the bye.
Yeah, maybe Howie saw that and he was like, I don't need a Jamal Williams. What's Jamal Williams going to do for us? And you don't want to invest too much into players that are rentals. You already have a laundry list of free agents that you're going to have to worry about after the season. Bringing in another one, parting with a pick probably wasn't in Howie's cards. He loves those picks. They still have 6 of them, so they can still wheel and deal and recoup a 4th if they need to next season. Any other notes you want to make of the deadline? I know around the NFC East, thankfully, Dallas did not get Brandon Cooks. Washington parted with William Jackson III, who is amongst the league leaders in yards allowed anyway. So just wasn't working out for him. Any other notes we need to make? Calvin Ridley, man, Doug Peterson stockpiling them receivers over there. You got Christian Kirk now. You got Calvin. It's some good things happening. I think that might be the best trade of the day, the Calvin Ridley one.
Calvin Ridley, suspended indefinitely for betting on the Falcons to beat the Jaguars.
Now he's on
Gets
the
traded
Jags.
to the Jaguars. So, yeah, that's a very complicated trade with all the conditions about reinstatement and playing time and extensions.
He'll
And
be
I don't
back
even
next
know
year.
how to
He'll be back next
understand
year.
it, but
He'll be
yeah,
back.
I assume he will be as well.
Yeah, the big move is that thankfully I know the Giants were looking at receivers. I'm surprised Brandon Cooks is still at the Texans. We're gonna have to worry about him on Thursday now. I was all but certain he would have been gone. We'll talk about the Houston matchup coming up after the break. Appreciate you guys for listening along to the EPA Podcast Eagles player analysis with myself, Victor Williams, as well as Shane Haff. Going to a quick break. When we come back, we will talk about some of the key matchups on the short week for the Eagles as they look to move to 8-0 against the Houston Texans. Stay tuned right here to Bleeding Green Nation.
Welcome back from break here on the EPA podcast. Victor and I are ready to dive into the Eagles matchup on Thursday night against the Houston Texans. Victor, potentially the Eagles could beat the Texans on Thursday night as the Phillies clinch the World Series.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like bad scheduling, I'm just going to say, but
Hey.
we're going to focus on the game that less people are probably going to be watching because from where I'm sitting, this Eagles-Texans game, it should not be much of a game. What are your thoughts on the Texans as we kind of dive into this one?
Yeah, it probably should be over by halftime. But we're in the age of technology. If you can't watch both at the same time, I don't know what to tell people. But if the Phillies didn't get postponed, they were on separate days anyway. But then the rain moved it and all this and that. But yeah, not a lot of bright spots for the Texans this year. Not a great season, but they do have some bright spots. Dameon Pierce, their running back, is one of them. He has 539 rushing yards on the year. I think he's averaging 4.5 yards a carry, and he's also pretty good out of the backfield, 20 catches for 98 yards. So I think the only rookie with more scrimmage yards than Pierce right now is Breece Hall, who was lost for the year to an injury, unfortunately. But Pierce is one of the matchups you're going to have to watch against this run defense. As we all know, the Eagles are stout against the run. They held Najee Harris in check on Sunday, but he's one guy you look at on offense. You obviously have to worry about Brandon Cooks now. Davis Mills isn't some all-world quarterback, but Brandon Cooks has been one of the most consistent receivers, probably underrated in my opinion. I don't know how many seasons he's had straight with 1,000 yards, but he does it quietly and consistently. And I know he has the stigma of the injury woes, and Eagles fans remember him for being knocked out of the Super Bowl, but he's still a very good receiver in his own right. This is why he's in trade rumors every year. This is why teams continuously are interested in him. But he stayed put, and now he's going to be Darius Slayer, James Bradbury's responsibility. But as far as the offense is concerned, other than Pearson and Brandon Cooks, there's not a whole lot going on there.
Yeah, the Texans rank 31st in offensive DVOA and 30th in defensive DVOA. This is just a bad football team.
Yeah, not great.
If we want to talk about their offense first, they do have a solid offensive line. And you mentioned Dameon Pierce, the rookie out of Florida. He's a good running back, and he generates a lot of yards after first contact. The Eagles have notably struggled tackling. So that's something to watch, especially with Jordan Davis out. The Texans like to run the ball early to try to set up play action. They are 21st in the league in early down pass rate at 51.4%. So they're going to run the ball on early downs. They're going to try to set up play action on late downs if they can get into third and short. They're fairly predictable as a team. The key for the Eagles is to limit the run, to keep them in third and long so play action does not play a role, because Davis Mills is just so much better with play action. When running play action, his completion percentage goes from 61 to 69%. His yards per attempt goes from 5.4 to 8.9. And his QB rating goes from 72.6 to 106.9. So much better passer when the threat of the run is there. All 6 of his interceptions on the year have come without play action. So you want to keep them out of situations where they can utilize their play action. And then, you get them into third and long. That's your money down. You really don't need to blitz. Like, their passing game, it's just not good enough to beat you. Just drop out into coverage, rush 4, do some of your D-line games that we saw early, and get out of this game early. Like you said, this should not be a very good game. This is a great matchup for the Eagles offense, their defense versus the Texans offense.
Yeah. This is another game where Jalen Hurts might potentially be pulled out of this game. And on the offensive side of it, Miles Sanders So the Eagles basically knew they could do whatever they want through the air to the Steelers, which is why Miles Sanders wasn't used a ton against Pittsburgh. This week should be the opposite because I believe this Texans defense is historically bad. Where are they dead last in rushing yards allowed this year? Since 1987, they're one of just 4 teams to allow 1,300 rushing yards through the first 7 games. That is hit on the wrong side of history there. And Miles Sanders, as we all know, when relied upon, we saw it in Jacksonville. He can make you pay, and he's another guy who's good with yards after contact. So if there was ever a game for us bettors out there, if there's ever a game to to look at Miles Sanders, 100 yards and potentially 1 or 2 touchdowns, and Hurts might carve him through the ground too because they are very bad at spying the quarterback. They do not know how to contain mobile quarterbacks. They don't know how to contain above average running backs at that. So I think this is going to be a very big game for Miles Sanders in the rushing attack.
So last week, the Texans played the Titans, where they gave up a 200-yard performance to Derrick Henry, 219 yards. It's the 4th straight time Derrick Henry has rushed for over 200 yards on the Texans. Now, Derrick Henry, notably better than Miles Sanders, but let's play a game called Who Played Quarterback for the Titans on Sunday? You might know this because you're a little bit of a draft guy. Some of our viewers might not, but there's a rookie, a guy named Malik Willis, making his first start out of Liberty.
Jalen Hurts light. That's who he is. A lot of the stuff he was doing in that game looked a lot like what Jalen Hurts was doing last year.
Yeah. So Malik Willis, he was, I think, a 4th-round pick, rookie making his first start. He went 6 of 10 passing for 55 yards. So they threw the ball 1 time in the second half, and yet Derrick Henry faced a light box on 50% of his carries. Like,
sounds like they could have used AJ Brown.
I don't understand what the Texans were doing. You're playing a rookie quarterback who's never going to throw the ball, and you were content to sit back with 2 high safeties, play light boxes, and let Derrick Henry rush for 200 yards. That's against a team that doesn't have a quarterback or a passing attack. And then you look at the Eagles. If the Texans were that concerned about allowing explosive plays to the Titans, who don't have explosive plays, imagine how they're going to play the Eagles. Like, this should be an absolute murder game for Miles Sanders on the ground. If you've got Miles Sanders in fantasy, you need to be playing him. This could be the Miles Sanders 200-yard game. I just don't see them selling out to stop the rushing attack when they were so terrified of Malik Willis throwing to Treylon Burks last week.
The spread opened up this week at 13 points. It's probably up to 13.5 now. That might be the first ever like double-digit spread lock I've seen since ever. Like, even that seems too low. That spread needs to be like 20, 21 points. The Texans have seen the most rushing attempts in the NFL this year at 234 and have given up an average of 5.6 yards per attempt. They are going to, if they don't rush for 200 yards in this game combined, because Miles might not play in the fourth quarter, then something went wrong. Flipping back to the defense side of it, cornerback Steven Nelson, former Eagle, is there. He had a pick last game, but other than that, not too many things to worry about on the secondaries. And I believe they have Jerry Hughes on the defensive line. I think if I remember his name right, I think Jerry Hughes is there on the defensive line. He has 5 sacks through 7 games. So it's not like they don't have any pass rushers, but the Eagles have the best offensive line in football. I don't anticipate that being an issue on Thursday night.
Yeah, I don't either. And the Texans, they run the league high rate of cover 2 zone. Lovie Smith, old school Tampa 2 guy. They run cover 2. And they run cover 2 on 26% of their snaps so far this year. So you're going to see 2 high safeties. You're going to see predictable defensive coverages. We just saw AJ Brown have a huge game against man coverage. That's not the Texans. I think this is going to be an RPO heavy game against zone coverage. This is going to be a Dallas Goedert game. I think Dallas Goedert has a big game here. They're going to use him as a run blocker because he's so good in those roles. They might get into, we saw a lot of 12 and 13 personnel against the Steelers. They might run that against the Texans and say, are you going to stay in too high against 13 personnel, 3 tight ends? Are you sure about that? Because we will run the ball down your throat. And so I think you're going to see a lot of running. You're going to see a lot of quick targets to Dallas Goedert. I don't expect, the huge AJ Brown game against their 2 high safety looks, unfortunately. So this may be more of a Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert game. But yeah, I think it's going to be a short game. The Eagles are going to run the ball by design, and then they're going to run the ball to run out the clock. So short game maybe gets, I don't know what time the World Series starts. Maybe the Eagles game is over first and you can catch both. You can catch the end of the World Series.
Hey man, if there is ever a game where the play action is going to set up a Quez touchdown, this might be it. This might be the one. So we'll keep an eye on that. One more matchup I think that stands out to me is they have rookie left guard Keon Green. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Keon Green along the offensive line. He's given up 23 pressures, 16 hurries, 6 hits according to Pro Football Focus, and he ranks 72 out of 79 guards in the NFL. Your guy Javon Hargrave, who was coming off a 2-sack game himself, should feast against this struggling rookie. Is that a matchup you think Jonathan Gannon will likely take advantage of?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely rush the passer. The problem a little bit is going to be that Davis Mills throws the ball so short to begin with.
Yeah.
He typically has a pretty quick time to throw. They typically are playing more horizontal than vertical, which the Eagles are fine with. The Eagles, now they struggle to tackle sometimes, but they'll be happy to try to rally and tackle that. It's not like the Texans have, great receivers to go make guys miss. But I was fairly high on Kenyon Green. I was trying to look and see where I had him rated when he came out of the draft, but he's definitely struggled so far this season. He was the number 27 player on my big board, so I had him at a little bit of a reach where he was selected at 15 overall by the Texans. But I think some more of that chaos, the stunt game that we talked about earlier, the Eagles may limit that because they're so concerned about stopping the run here. But I really just don't fear the Texans offense. I mean, the Texans offense had 71 yards prior to their final drive in the fourth quarter against the Titans when the Titans dropped into prevent and let them go score a touchdown. So it's just not a scary offense. It's not a scary defense. The Eagles really should roll through this one.
Yeah, Davis Mills on the year, just 1,500 yards, 8 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and you mentioned just 6.4 yards per attempt. So it's not like he's chucking that thing downfield. He's looking for dink and dunk options. Hopefully, he's looking for Dameon Pierce to carry the load. He'll find Brandon Cooks here and there, but other than that, I think that the Texans are just looking for a moral, just looking for any positives to come out of this game because I don't think. Oh, battery died. Don't worry. But I think that the Texans don't have a whole lot of things in that locker room. They can sit here and say, yeah, we're going to go ahead and beat the Eagles. But any given Sunday, the Texans at 1-5-1, maybe they'll make some things happen. Anything else you want to touch on for this Eagles and Houston game before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I think the most notable thing to watch for people in this game, a game that might not be a very good game, is to see how the Eagles play the run. It will be a good test for their run defense without Jordan Davis. The Texans don't have a great rushing attack, but they do have a good running back who excels at running through tackles. And so that's probably the most important thing that I'm going to keep my eye on is just to see how the Eagles are able to respond without Jordan Davis. It should give us some indications for what they're going to try to do over the next 4 to 6 weeks while he's out.
Yeah, if there was ever a game for them to go ahead and test that, it's this one. They got a pretty good opponent to go ahead and try new things as they prepare for the playoff run down the stretch. Appreciate you guys for tuning into this episode of the EPA Podcast, the weekly edition of the as we dive into the X's and O's every week with myself, Victor Williams, and Shane Haff. Be sure to follow me on Twitter and all the other platforms at the Philly Pod. Shane, where can the people find you? What content you got coming up as the Eagles prepare to move to 8-0 on Thursday night?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at halfandhalf_TPL. I got my YouTube handle finally. So I'm on YouTube at Shane Haff NFL. That's Haff HAFF. So you can check it out there. I've got 3 all-22 videos up this week. I looked at the deep passes, all 4 of the touchdowns and the near miss to AJ Brown and talked about how the Eagles got those open. I looked at the stunt games that they ran with the defensive line, and then I put one out on just the Eagles' late down, 3rd and 4th down conversions. So you can go check those out. They're tweeted out in smaller clips too if you don't want to mess with YouTube. But yeah, you can find me on YouTube, find me on Twitter, in the link tree, of course. All hail the link tree.
The good old link tree.
It's still there with all the links.
Sounds good. As you guys know, be sure to subscribe to BGN Radio on Bleeding Green Nation, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, wherever else you can find your shows. We'll catch you guys on next week's episode of EPA, hopefully talking about an Eagles win and still remain undefeated. Thank you guys for checking this out. We'll catch you guys on the next episode here at Bleeding Green Nation.
Go Birds.